listen to this, Boggies. Hold on. Listen to this, Boggies. Fudge. Listen to this, Boggies.
What's happening with that?
I think it's broken.
You try it on the side?
Listen to this, Boggies. Nice. Go, Daryl.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to episode 34 of Your Brain on God. It's Daryl and Aaron here. We are going to be talking about the art of letting go. This is a spiritual principle that Jesus talks about, in Mark and Matthew in the Gospels. He talks about if we try to find our lives or hold on to our lives, we will lose it. But if we lose our lives for His sake and for the gospel, we will find it or we will save it. So there's this concept, and it applies in more than just one way. So hope you enjoy the conversation. Sit back, listen up, and here we go.
Boom, boom. There is such gravity to what we're about to talk about that it is heavy for me to even be able to speak, because the words that we're about to speak into your eardrums are so dang heavy.
So heavy. But it's like so heavy that it makes you light.
These words that you are about to hear in this podcast are so heavy that they're anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity. It's going down past gravity through the other side of gravity, which is bringing up.
Exactly. The upside down.
The upside down of gravity.
Which is what we're talking about today.
Did you know that once you get to the central point of gravity, it starts going backwards?
What does that mean?
I'm just kidding. It does not mean anything at all.
I thought you meant like interstellar stuff, It's like gravity has something to do with time travel.
If we can get to the center of gravity, that statement itself just doesn't work.
You know what's funny about having a podcast is I feel like just having mics like this gives you some sort of authority where we could say some stuff like that and people would probably believe us.
Right. Just say something.
Yeah. Like something about gravity. We could be like, actually, when you actually reverse gravity, everything starts actually pulling towards the black hole. And people would be like, frick, what about black holes and gravity? I know it has something to do with black holes and gravity, but people probably believe it.
Through the other side of a black hole is projection.
Is projection.
Whatever we are projecting from ourselves.
Don't become a black hole. Well, we're excited to talk about the upside down kingdom that Jesus presents in the gospel, and not a specific part of the upside down kingdom, because there's this concept that we want to talk about today. Jesus, he says this statement, and it's in Mark 8:35. And he says this to his disciples: if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. So if you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you give up your life, you'll save it. And Jesus has all of these upside down, kind of like backwards type of statements in Scripture, and they're not just from the New Testament, but there's like the humble will be exalted in the Old Testament as well. There's kind of like these opposites that Jesus talks about, right? So he says like the last will be first. He says things that are like counterintuitive, like love those who persecute you, love your enemies. Don't just love people who love you. Give and you will receive. And then this one, which it's kind of funny, it's like Jesus, he speaks into things in a specific context, right? So he's talking to disciples and he says, if you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. And he's talking about how you have to pick up your cross and follow him. You have to deny yourself, right? That's kind of the context. And Jesus talked about this a lot, about letting go of self. I guess in a psychological way, you could say like letting go of, I would say even letting go of ego, but letting go of your own desires, your own will. And then anybody who tries to hold on to that, to your own self, to your own selfish desires, to your own body, your own will, right? You end up losing it, but anyone who would lose their life for my sake will save it. So it's like this kind of counterintuitive way of living that Jesus presents his people, which is in the letting go, you actually end up saving what you were trying to hold on to. And this is important, and this is why we wanted to talk about it on Your Brain on God. This is important because I don't think that this is for just this specific context, or even just necessarily a religious context that this applies. This applies like all throughout life. Kind of this concept that if you let go, you end up receiving. And there's constant examples of this, I think, all over the place, right? So you have like a mother or even a father, just parents that let go, not in an unhealthy way where they don't discipline, right? But they let go of their child to make their own mistakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To actually make their own decisions. You actually usually end up seeing that kid making better decisions, or if they do go off, they end up coming back because their parents lived open-handed. Right. Yeah. There's an essence of letting go of people's opinions that actually encourages, I guess, people to have better opinions about you because you're not trying to,
trying to impress people or trying to get good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, letting go of certain fears even, right? Like the holding on of fears in our lives, specific fears, say in relationships, it can actually cause those fears, right? If you don't actually let go of your fears, you end up becoming like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you end up actually walking into the very fears that you were holding so tightly onto, right?
Yeah, because of the way you're behaving based on holding on to those fears.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And so I want to have a conversation about how this actually plays out in our life and why it's important, because Jesus makes this thing pretty clear, and I think it's in every single one of the Gospels, this idea of laying down your life. Mm-hmm. And in laying down your life, God actually gives us the opportunity to pick it back up again, but we pick up his life, right? It's like this trade, like our life, our ideas, our will. And it's so counterintuitive to us because everything in us seems to be bred to survive.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that there are many very practical parts of us in our brain functions that are wired to survive. And I think part of that survival instinct drives us to cling on to things that ultimately work against us.
Right.
We hold on to relationships that are actually hurting us because we want healthy relationships, and so we try to hold on to the ones that exist, but really they're doing damage. But if we can let go of those relationships, it creates space for healthy relationships.
Right. Exactly.
Or our need to be accepted by people, like you're saying, and wanting acceptance. And if we focus on wanting acceptance and trying to gain acceptance, we end up behaving in a way that probably ultimately leads to rejection.
Right.
And leads to people pushing us away. But if we let go of the need to have acceptance, we are just ourselves, and we'll find ourselves in places where we are truly authentically accepted.
Right. Yeah. I was just talking to somebody this morning about their marriage and stuff, and we were talking about how you need to be able to let them go. And then, like, the more that you hold on to the person, the more that they're going to resent you. Like, it was like this clinging to this, and it was the ideal of that person, right? Where she was holding on so much to maybe the ideal, or what should be what the marriage should look like, or what a husband should look like, clinging so closely to that you don't actually allow space for somebody actually to be that for you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I see this a lot in relationships. Like, you have an idea of what the relationship should look like, or what that person should do, who they should be, how they should act, right? And you cling to that so much that anytime that they don't live up to maybe that standard, or that expectation for you, right? You get burdened. You're kind of even tied to your expectation. Right? So that person doesn't live up to that expectation. Now you're caught in a flurry because you almost need that person to live up to that expectation in order for you to be okay. So now you're in that, right? And you're holding so tightly for that person to be that you actually push them away. And the more that they fail at that, the more they kind of develop this, this defeat mentality, and they don't actually live up to that standard. But what I've seen in relationships specifically is the more that you let go of somebody and allow them the space to actually become something, it's almost like, it's kind of weird because at least in my own mind, it seems like they become what you were looking for.
Yeah, well, yeah, they could.
They could, or they
always
could
that way.
not. Like when you really
Right.
let go, but I'm saying that they develop skills on their own. Like there's this heart to grow in people. I believe there is this heart to do better in people. There is this heart to love well. To you know what I mean. So
Right.
so when you let go of somebody and you give them space to actually grow, they step into that.
Yeah, and I think part of that
Maybe
is
not
even,
all the time. I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but
yeah, maybe they don't become exactly how you were wanting them to become the whole time. But once you let go, they might. They would. Then there is space for them to just be, and you
Right.
can, if you start accepting them as they are, you might end up in a place where you wanted to be anyways, even if it's not what you
Right.
thought it was going to be.
right,
Maybe they're not the person that you thought they needed to be before,
right.
but you're in the space in the relationship that you were wanting to be.
Right. This is the thing is I think that every single one of us, we have our own desires. We have our own will, right? Like what we think ideally life should look like. And what I've realized is that we are limited, very, very limited. And the more I get to know God, the more I realize how limited my ideals even are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So my even perceptions of how things should be are usually very limited and broken.
Right. Yeah.
So often the expectations that I put on people are limited and broken. And it's actually probably could be even better than I'm imagining that person to be. Right. So,
Yeah.
And that God has more for that person that I'm putting an expectation, or that situation even that I'm putting an expectation on, or that I'm holding so tightly to. God has something so much greater for even that when I put expectations on it and get frustrated, but my expectations, instead of letting go, I'm not allowing God's actually will for that person or expectations in that situation to come through.
Yeah. I think that happens in so many different ways, not just in our expectation of somebody else, even of ourselves sometimes, maybe of things that we are trying so hard to do something. And then once we just give ourselves space to be and to feel what we need to feel and like come to terms with where we're actually at, then we start to come to this place where we grow and we change, but if we're trying to push away from the things that we don't want inside of ourselves, and we create this like tension, and we don't actually acknowledge where we're at, so that way we can move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's this quote that I'm thinking of that's it's written by an old English guy, but it's complicated.
I think I know what he's saying. Just say it.
It's okay. Well, there's two. One of them is we must first accept ourselves to be that which, or confess ourselves to be that which we can no longer consent to remain.
I think you've mentioned this on the podcast before.
Yeah, I might have.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's this idea of we have to first let go of this need to be something different than we are. Once we let go of the need to be different than we currently are, we can actually start being different than we currently are.
Or somebody else.
Yeah.
Or some other situation.
I don't think that we should ever have an expectation of what somebody needs to be, unless it's I guess there's some healthy levels of of expectation to what to expect of a human.
I expect some people to be, semi-kind, I think.
Yeah. But I think
cordial, at least.
If we're like, this person needs to be like this, otherwise I won't accept them. That
right.
If it's rigid and doesn't create space for somebody to be anything different,
right,
we're probably setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Right. And a lot of the expectations that we even have in life have been given to us. I mean, and I mean that maybe on a more surface level. So all of us have a desire, a deep, deep desire in us for connection, for significance. I think there's like 6 needs of a human being, right? For it's connectedness, significance. Oh my gosh.
Are you talking about Tony Robbins?
Tony Robbins talks about it.
There's
what?
Let's see if I can remember all 6.
Certainty,
uncertainty, significance.
Certainty and uncertainty.
Certainty, uncertainty.
Variety is what's called.
Variety.
Yeah.
Which is it's essentially the same thing. It's just not knowing, having different things. Significance. There is love and connection.
Love and connection.
Contribution and growth.
Contribution and growth.
Yeah.
Okay, so 7.
No, there's your 6.
There's 6. Okay, I don't know. You said love and connectedness. I count those as 2 for some reason.
Yeah, love and connection is
Right.
1.
So we have these core desires, but then there's ways in maybe our culture to actually satisfy those desires. Right. So there's certain ways, whether it's a relationship or it's a new car or it's a nice house or it's the American dream or, whatever, insert thing here. Right. So then we get expectations, not realizing those underlying desires. And then we get expectations for things and we start holding on to things that grant us those needs inside of us. Right. So that need for significance, that need for love and connectedness, that need for variety, whatever it is, we use those things to hold on to our lives. But the problem is that those things we find out very quickly end up being very fleeting.
Right. Yeah.
Fleeting and ultimately not satisfying. It's like, well, once I have one nice car, I want another nice car. And there's a need in us for more and more and more and more and more. So once you have connectedness with one person, it's like, I want more connectedness. I need more love. I need more intimacy. And once you get to a certain point, and there's an endless ladder of things to grow in. Right. But then, so we have these desires and these needs, these expectations or whatever, and then they don't actually satisfy us. But the more that we hold on to those things, the more we end up losing, like Jesus is saying, the more we end up losing what we started doing those things for in the first place, which is that sense of connectedness and love, that sense of variety, that sense of significance, of contribution, of growth, all of those different kinds of things. Because the more you hold on, I think it's true, the more you lose those things.
Yeah. And in regards to those needs, Tony Robbins talks about healthy and unhealthy ways of getting those needs met. And I think that sometimes we will feel a need for significance and we try to get it in an unhealthy way. And we hold on to those things, the unhealthy way of feeling significant, which then it kind of cuts out the other things that we also feel like we need, like love and connection, because we might sacrifice certain things to feel significant, not realizing that is causing brokenness in relationships.
Right.
But if we let go of that unhealthy need or unhealthy way of getting that met, we create space for these other needs that we have in our life to actually be met.
Right.
That I don't know if they happen naturally, but it seems like there's less resistance
right.
in experiencing that.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen this, I think going back to what you were talking about of it actually being like something in core in us as well. Right. There's a practice in meditation, right, of kind of like this no thought practice, right? Stepping into no thought, allowing your brain to kind of go like kind of hit the like the dead meter, but in a good way, but almost like to still your mind, right?
Yeah.
But it what I've seen, at least in my practice of stillness, right, and meditation with God, has been that the more aware I actually become of thoughts and the more I actually let thoughts go, the more that stillness comes, right?
Right.
The more that I try and hold on to ideas, the more I try and hold on to thoughts, the more I try and control scary ideas or scary thoughts, scary emotions, the worse they get, right? It's almost like there's this spiritual law or whatever, that the more that you resist something, the greater it gets.
Yeah, like it grows.
It grows.
The resistance just becomes greater.
Right. So like this plays out in relationships. Like we've talked about it before, but the more that you see in those relationships that you're trying to fight as hard as you can for there not to be some sort of unfaithfulness in a relationship. And there's a fear around that, right? So you're fighting it so hard. You're trying to maintain the connection so much. You're holding on to that connection more and more and more and more. The more you actually perpetuate patterns that might actually lead to unfaithfulness.
Yeah. It reminds me of like driving. Remember when I was learning to drive and being told that...
adultery reminds you of driving?
Just this concept of being so afraid of something happening that you almost cause it to happen.
Right.
Is like when you're driving, if you're scared of getting in an accident and you allow that fear to be the thing that you're focused on, of I can't get in an accident, and you're trying to avoid getting an accident, you're more likely to end up driving in a way that will cause an accident.
Right.
Because
Sporadically.
you're being too sporadically defensive and protecting yourself, and you're actually driving in a way that's not safe.
Right.
And your fear of getting in an accident can cause you to get into an accident.
Right.
And that same thing, I think, happens in our lives with relationships, with ourselves, with things that we're pursuing or trying to get, that we focus so much on what we're afraid of happening that it ends up happening.
Right.
But if we let that go,
Right.
we're not going to be a driving factor in that thing taking place.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah. And so I think Jesus is on to something. Because I mean, it plays out in all of these, it has all of these different manifestations, right? So yeah, you have like that relationship aspect. And then what I was talking about is with your own mind, it's like the more you resist a scary thought, the more scary it gets.
Yeah, like don't think about this. Don't think about this.
Right. It's like the pink elephant in the room, right? So the more that you're trying to fight it because I don't want to have this thought, I don't want to have this feeling, I don't want to have this emotion inside of me, the more that emotion actually starts to overcome you. And the more you let go of maybe the meaning behind that emotion, that thought, that feeling, the more you let go of what you should be feeling. I think we have a lot of these ideas and again, expectations of what I should be feeling, of where I should be, right? The more that you let go of those expectations and actually embrace those emotions, that's kind of like the practice of entering into no thought, is actually allowing thoughts to come in and then allowing them to go. Allowing emotions to come in, feel them, and then allowing them to go, right? And the more you let go of needing to control all of those things that are going on inside of you, actually, the more control you have. So as I've been practicing this, it's very strange. The more I let go, the more I start to choose what I want to think about.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like you're practicing controlling your thoughts in a sense, and rather than letting them control you.
Right.
Because when they try to control you, it's like, what's that martial art that's like all about redirecting energy? You know what I'm talking about?
You would know,
Jukendo. Is that what it's called? Jukendo? I don't know.
I think that is it.
Or is that, I don't know. I can't remember. But, or Kempo. Anyways, there's this martial art that's like all about redirecting the opponent's energy. Like someone throws a fist, you don't just like block it.
Are you talking about Wakanda?
What?
He has that suit that redirects energy.
No, it's like kinesthetic absorption. No, he absorbs the energy and then he projects it back out.
That's actually so sick. Can we just talk about that for a second? Oh, just kidding. Okay, go.
But it's like this, when your thoughts come in, like trying to control, it's like you just redirect the energy of the thought and let the energy pass by rather than trying to stop it,
Right.
Stop it from happening. You just let it pass by.
Right.
And without judgment, without needing to make it mean something else, just acknowledge it and send it on its way.
Right. And that brings so much stillness, right? There's this way that I've always pictured it where it's like I'm sitting in a train station and my thoughts are like trains going through the train station. And I have the opportunity to just observe, to be an observer of my thoughts, right? So every thought, every emotion is like a train going through the train station. And I simply I imagine myself sitting on a bench, looking at all these trains, emotions, and thoughts coming through. And I have the choice whether or not I want to jump on that train or not.
Yeah.
So I can actually observe these things. I can look at it and they might stay for longer than expected. Right? So that scary emotion, that scary thought, whatever, they might stay for longer than emotion. But the more that I let go of the need to get rid of it in a certain amount of time and expectation I have on how long I should suffer, the less I suffer.
Yeah.
So it's like, it honestly is this crazy journey, I believe, to trusting God.
Yeah.
Is this letting go, because what it really comes down to is I guess in a way trusting that everything's going to be okay, right? Because I remember God speaking to me a while ago, and he spoke to me pretty clearly, and he said, Aaron, you only fight the lies that you believe, right?
Yeah.
So if there's actually something that goes through me that I don't believe, I'm not going to fight it.
You're not going to be thinking about it.
Right. If you're like a simple one, a silly one, right, would be like, Aaron, you got blonde hair. It's like, what?
Right.
Why would I even like try and address that? Why would I try and file? No, I don't, Daryl. You know what I mean?
Do
I don't have blonde hair. It's
Why
like
did you say I have blonde hair? What's going on with my hair?
Exactly. What's the motive for him having blonde hair? Why does he see that? Did I do something different with my hair? Right. And that's what we do with thoughts, right? That's what we do with things that come inside of insecurities that come into our mind, all fears, all that kind of stuff, is that those things come in, and then there's this essence of belief in them. Right? Or fear that they might actually happen, or they might actually control our lives. So what do? No. No, or so we try and control them, we try and shake them, we try and throw them out, we try and get rid of that thought, get rid of that emotion, get rid of that feeling, maybe even get rid of that relationship, right? We try and do all that stuff, control other people to make them, live up to our own expectations so that those things don't happen. And then we're fighting those things because we're not actually trusting that everything's going to be all right if we didn't, right? And that's basically, it's anxiety, right? Coming back to those terms, you're going into fight or flight mode, and it distorts reality, right? So you feel like you have to do something in order to survive, and so what Jesus in a very real way is saying, like, let go of your self-protection, like let go of the ways that you're trying to keep yourself, of the ways that you try and defend yourself from different emotions, from different thoughts, from the way that you try and keep your own little bubble of life, right? Your certain needs in order, and you have everything locked in, and I planned this all out, and I have this all together, and I got my finances in place, and I have all these. Not that those things are bad in themselves, but when those become the source of reliance of life, you end up losing those things.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
No, I was going to say you just end up living in a way that perpetuates you losing those things you were trying so desperately to hold on to. Yeah,
totally. Even after Jesus said that, after he said, if you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it, but if you lose it for my sake, you will save it. Mm-hmm. He, at least in Matthew, he goes on to say that, for what benefit is it for you to gain the whole world and to lose your soul? So even if you do end up getting these things and holding on to all the stuff you feel like you need to hold on to, is it worth losing your soul, which is like the essence of who you are? You know, if you look at that word up in the Greek, it kind of talks about that. It's like your essence. It's like everything about you that makes you you. And we can hold on to things so much that we end up losing who we actually are because we're holding on to these things. But letting go of those things allows us to actually find ourselves. Right. If we let go of our life, we'll find it. Right. And let go of it for the sake of Jesus and the gospel, as he says, we will save our life. Mm-hmm. And there is this, and he says it in other ways too, the same kind of concept with like the first shall be last, in the kingdom. When if you're trying to be the first person in everything, you're going to be the last in the kingdom of God, and vice versa. And even the concept of there's no greater love than to lay down your life for another, for your brother. It's like there's all these concepts of losing things, letting go of things in order to attain something greater. And there is something greater that can only be attained through the laying down of something else. You know? It's like we have to lose our life in order to actually save it. And it applies in relationships and in workplace. If you're like in a workplace and you're trying to prove yourself all the time, you're probably not going to sit where you are and be present to add value where you're at, because you're thinking about where you're trying to get to.
Or you need people's validation of where you're at, your own position. You probably won't be as effective as a leader as you want to be,
because you're trying to do what you think someone else wants you to do, rather than doing what you're trusted to do in the position that you're currently in. And there's this story of that's in the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But this person who was working for a boss, it's based off of a real story. He was working for somebody who nobody liked working for this person. This boss was always upset about things and never liked what the team was bringing. And the team would always just grumble and complain about, what they wish was different, where they wanted to go, how much they wanted things to change. But there was one man who was on the team who decided to just accept what was and to bring the most value he could to where he was. And when he started doing that, things started changing, right? Once he let go of the need for it to be different and he just started to do what he could with where he was, things started to change. And the team environment changed. The boss started being happier and being kinder to the team. And he was actually there meeting the needs of the team. rather than thinking about what he needed to hold on to, where he was trying to go, trying to get promoted. And he just was like, you know what, I'm just going to be here and do the best that I can with what I have and to be present. And in that, he started getting the promotion. He started getting like the attention and the validation, and like, wow, good job. This is awesome. And he shifted the whole dynamic of the team once he stopped needing the team to be different.
So you end up spending almost, when you're trying to control things, when you're trying to hold on things, it's almost like you spend more energy focusing on what really you can't control.
Yeah, it really,
rather than developing yourself or being present in a way to actually change things that could actually lead to those desired outcomes.
And it was actually on the topic of influence and circles of influence versus the things that are not in your control. So he's like, you have circles of influence and things that are outside of your area of influence.
Right.
Whenever we focus on what's outside of our area of influence, that's when we waste energy, waste time. We aren't making a difference. But when we focus on what's in our area of influence, we can actually do something. It might be a little bit different than what Jesus was talking about, but it kind of plays into that. It ties into that too. The same principle, the same principle of letting something go in order to actually find something and find the thing that you're trying to save. I mean, trying to actually find the thing that you're trying to save by letting it go.
Right.
It's that same thing ties in. It's like if we keep focusing on the thing that we want to be different, we might not actually see anything change. But if we focus on what we are doing now and just adding value to what we're doing, we might see that thing actually come to pass.
And I think this is actually it's Jesus's message in word, but I think it's actually, it's how he lived his life as well, right? So you could look at the death and resurrection even as like almost like the grand scale of this this principle, right? So you have like the full, like you said, like there's no greater love than to lay down your life for a brother, right? And then Jesus literally let his life go. It says that he says that no one takes my life from me.
Right.
He says, I'm giving up my life. No one's taking this from me. I'm giving up my life for you. Right. And then in giving up his life, what happens? A resurrection happens.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I'm reminded, and Jesus says this, you got to pick up your cross and die daily. Right. There's this essence, and I've actually talked about this with Max, my counselor, of dying before you die. That's really important. And Max talks about it all the time. He says, I got to die before I die. I have to die before I die. And I think it's very powerful because there's all of these opportunities in our lives to have these mini deaths, right? These mini deaths where you let go. And death involves grieving sometimes. Death involves holding on sometimes, right? And we have certain ideals, expectations, desires, wills. Some of us are very strong-willed. We are going after things and we want those things so bad, and we want our lives to look a certain way, and we want this type of person for a relationship, and all those different kinds of stuff. We have expectations, right? And we have to learn how to let those things die, trusting that there's opportunity for a resurrection.
Yeah.
Right. And this is
good.
this is what scripture says about Abraham, right? God asks Abraham to lay down literally an expectation that he had been waiting for from the time, I think, how many years was it? I think it was like, he was 80 or 70.
It was like 30 years they're waiting.
Yeah, 30 years, I think, for this promised son, right? And so God comes to him. He says, "Go off this. I'm going to give you a son. I'm going to do all this crazy stuff. You're going to have like many nations are going to come from you," right? And the guy doesn't even have a kid. And then finally, 30 years later, after a bunch of stuff happens and Abraham makes some mistakes and tries to have a kid through his own means, right? His own control, right? Which ends up being a son of kind of destruction there, even though God blesses the kid, right? But it's through the child of the slave, Paul says later, right? Almost like a slavery to the law. It represents the law. But anyway, then he ends up having the kid, and then God says, hey, go sacrifice this kid. And in today's culture, in context, we're like, sacrifice a kid? God's evil. Are you kidding me? Well, okay, bruh, Abraham was in a very different time period where sacrificing your kid would be normal, okay? And
Right.
it wasn't God's intention to literally kill, to have Abraham sacrifice his kid. I think if anything, it was God showing Abraham, I don't want your
I
kid.
don't want you to sacrifice.
I don't
your
want
kid
you to
anymore.
sacrifice your kid.
You don't
he
have
was
to do that.
He was actually asking him to do that. Anyway, that's besides the point. That's a different theological question. But he asks him to sacrifice the very thing he had been expecting and waiting for 30 years.
and try to get by his own means.
By his own means and control.
And then it finally happened. Whenever he surrendered and waited for God.
Right. It finally happened. He finally surrendered to God. And then what does God say after God finally gives the promise, after it actually goes his way? Abraham's like, it finally went my way. I had my kid. God actually provided. Yeah. And then God's like, hey, by the way, go give that up too. It's like, right? And then Abraham does. And you guys have probably heard the story, right? God ends up providing is it a lamb caught in the thicket? Or the ram, I think. Yeah, the ram caught in the thicket, and he doesn't have to sacrifice his son Isaac, right? And it says in Hebrews, it says that Abraham believed God to the point of even believing that his son would somehow be resurrected from the dead.
Right.
So Abraham, before resurrection was even an idea in his mind, trusted God so much to the point where he said, if I let go of my son, right, I believe that somehow God will resurrect this thing.
And his trust.
His trust. His trust.
Surrendering his control.
Right.
Everything that he wanted, he surrendered it.
Right.
And trusted God to come through.
Right. And you have to be willing to allow things to die in your life.
Yeah.
Like you have to allow your ego to die, your desires to die, your expectations of people to die, all of those things. You have to let them die. And, your strong maybe desires for your children, right? To let them go. I love the concept of Mary having to watch her son Jesus die on a cross. Every mother's nightmare.
Did you say you love that?
No. I don't love that she had to. I'm sorry. I don't want to be. No. I'm saying this is what I love about it.
But you just paused, so I was wondering.
No.
I know you had more to say.
I don't love the fact that Mary had to watch Jesus die. That's all I'm saying. I love what it conveys is a mother letting her son go to the point of death. Yeah. Which is, and I may be speaking out of my kind of pay grade here, right? Not anthropologically speaking. Oh gosh. Which is one of the greatest, I would say, I guess, tropes of even motherhood is allowing your kid to go into the world, right? As a parent, right? Yeah. Allowing your kid to get hurt. Allowing your kid, you know what I mean? To the full extent of that word, you have to let your kid go. And then what happens? Her kid comes back to life and is exalted. Mm-hmm. Right? Like there's this opportunity for parents, to let their children go. And then in that going, there's this safety created, and their kids actually end up having better relationships with their parents when they let them go, right? There's all these things where you have to let these things die, and in them dying, trusting God to bring about a resurrection.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Jesus said it, man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, letting things go. I remember one time when I was in college, in this time of like worship and prayer, and I was just had my hands open to God, and I remember having this moment of him saying, like, when I was praying, I was asking for, I don't remember what I was asking for, but I was asking for something, and he said, I can't give you something if you have closed hands.
Right.
And I had this very physical moment of opening up my fingers, as far as I could. Like I need to sit with my hands open. Right. I have to let it go.
Pulling your fingers back,
and not try to hold on to all the stuff that I want. And let it go. And it's scary letting things die,
right?
Because we can't see the other side. Right now we can't see on the other side. Well, what's going to happen if I let it go? What about all the bad things that might take place? Or what about all the things that might fall apart? Or what about the things that might not come back?
Right.
But there's this beautiful thing that happens, and when we can let go and sit with open hands And in that moment, even if something does get taken away or lost, trusting God to give us whatever it is that we need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's in that place of surrender, that's really the only time we can let something go, is whenever we have truly surrendered.
Right.
It's like surrendering is like, I'm laying aside my power to do anything else. You know, It's like if you're in war and you're surrendering, it means you're not going to use your power to actively resist. You're not going to use your power to try to do something different. You're surrendering to the will of the person that you're surrendering to.
Which is a very humble position.
Yes, and it's a very humble position.
And because you're basically saying, I can't do this.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. I can't do this, and I'm not going to try to do this anymore.
Right.
And you have to come to that place where you say that, where you say, I'm not going to try to do this anymore. I'm not going to try to hold on to all these things. I'm not going to try to make all these things happen.
Right.
But at the same time,
I'm not going to try to make these people like me anymore. I'm not going to try and, force people's opinions towards me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and force my way into this position, force my life, force my job and my dreams.
Totally. Yeah. And I've had thoughts of like, cross my mind at work, like, oh, what did this person think about that thing that happened or what I just did? And then if I let myself, I'll start thinking, well, how can I like make sure that I have their approval, or, or like thinking through the situations of like, well, what did I do? Maybe were they thinking this? Were they not thinking that? But I have to come to this place of letting it go and just trusting, well, if they think this and it's not true, then it doesn't matter. Eventually what is true will come to the forefront.
Yes.
If I allow myself to just be me. Right. But if I try to gain their approval and I'm like doing all these things that I wouldn't naturally be doing, I'm out of my own comfort zone. I'm like not being myself, And if I come to this point of letting it go, then I think, okay, well, whatever is most true will come to the forefront if I leave my hands open, rather than trying to force something to take place. Yeah, and just trusting and surrendering and to God, everything that I am. Right, that whole concept of the soul is like every part of me. Right, if I find the world and lose my soul, I don't want, like, what's the opposite of that? Well, find your soul and lose the world. You have to let go of everything else to find yourself and to be with Christ and be one with Christ. You can't be holding on to all these different things. Mm-hmm. And as we find ourselves in surrender, I think that's where we find ourselves most found, and truly found, and whole. Right, is in that place of letting go.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the same experience I had, and I think it's what faith is. Is the more that I let go of the need to be certain, the more certain I got. Mm-hmm. Because I just didn't need to like have this experience of being certain about things. In fact, I was like, I'm not certain about anything. And I kind of held, like you said, it was more with me with my thoughts and my beliefs. And I think I talked about this in our very first episode, but kind of changing my idea of my own theology, ideology, my own ideas about things, holding them very loosely, besides maybe a couple core beliefs, which is like Jesus is Lord, he's King, and I love him, and he loves me, and I'm saved, that kind of stuff, right? So I held on maybe 4 or 5 beliefs, and then everything else was like grains of sand in my hands, right? Yeah. And so I wasn't really certain about anything, right? I kind of gave that up and allowed myself to go on the journey, and now I feel like I'm in a point in my life where there's way more certainty in my life about things than I ever had before. Yeah. Because I'm not holding on to that, right? And I think that's an aspect of what faith is, right? Because I think we have a very... I would say in maybe our Western world as well, we try and grasp faith with our minds, and if we're not certain about things, it has to do with our faith, which isn't faith. That's not even necessarily where faith comes from. It can be articulated maybe through the mind, but it's not where faith is originated. Right. Yeah. Right. So it's like once I feel this certain way about it, or I feel certain about this thing, or I kind of grasp this concept, then I can have faith. It's like, that's not faith. So the more that you try and do that, the more you're actually stepping away from faith. Faith is actually saying like, no, you can't do that. And actually surrendering all those thoughts and saying, I don't know, I need to know, and actually trusting that God will reveal himself to you. Yeah. Trusting that all of those things that you're looking for, those answers that you're looking for, will actually come. Yeah. But you have to let go of the need to receive those answers in order to find the answers that you're looking for. And that's what faith is. That's what Abraham is. That's why he's the father of faith. right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's why he's the
He
father of
just
the Israelites, the
believes God.
father of faith, is because he let go of even all these ideas about what God had even spoken or what he had thought about God, all these different types of things. He's like, I hope this comes back to life,
Yeah.
and we have to learn how to do that in our lives. And I think as we do this, one, the anxiety is decreased by so much because it is exhausting to try and control your life. It's exhausting to try and control your life. And then you add on trying to control the feelings, the thoughts of other people.
Right.
It's like now you're trying to
No
hold
way.
5 people's lives in your hands and try and control and manipulate and make sure all those relationships and things are working out. And then it's like all the thoughts in my brain, the emotions that I'm feeling about all of these people trying to, right? There's so much that anxiety that comes with trying to control your life. But allowing those things to die, I believe, is where that freedom comes.
Yeah.
Where you really do save your life. It's like, this is real life, like not holding on to these things. And now it feels like now I could just go on the journey of everything that and it's a process, right? So it's like you kind of reach for life again, right? So you kind of jump off the cliff and then reach for a rope, and it's like you get scared and you're like, right? I mean, we're going to end it soon, but I saw a video of this guy bungee jumping or whatever. He was trying to bungee jump and he just couldn't jump off the ledge, right?
yeah.
So he would like half jump off the ledge and then turn around and grab
my
onto the
gosh.
thing. And he did that like 5 different times, right? And that's kind of what we do with our lives, right? It's like, I'm going to let go of this in my life, or I'm going to let go of this unforgiveness, or I'm going to let go of this expectation for my husband, for my wife. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm actually just going to love. I'm going to let go of all this stuff. And then we kind of like jump and then we're like, no, I can't do it, right? And we like turn around and try and grab a hold of our lives, and it creates this constant anxiety. But I mean, sometimes we just got to send it.
Just send it.
Just send it.
You just got to send it. Yeah. There was something that came to mind is in the letting go and surrendering. I think that so if we come to a point where we think, I'm just going to give up, whatever happens is going to happen. I think that's kind of different. It's like not in the letting go, letting things die is not about neglecting things.
No.
Not about turning away from something and acting like it's not there anymore.
No.
You know, like a
It's
problem.
the opposite.
Yeah.
It's embracing those crazy things inside. You know what I mean?
Right.
Embracing the possibility of even if too, right? Like,
yeah. Embracing the possibility of even if, totally, even if it's, and still, like Jesus said, you will find your life when you lose it for my sake and for the gospel. It's like there's still something to be moving towards.
Right.
And it's not just a neglectful, let everything go, just forget about it. It's going to turn out however it turns out.
Right.
And, there's still an active part that we have to play in letting something go, but then still the active surrender, the active trust, the active moving, leaning in and welcoming what it is that comes,
right?
And still being present and active in what's happening, even though we're letting go and we're letting things die.
Right. Yeah. What is the gospel? It's bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth, right? So there's necessary changes that still need to happen. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that we don't make moves to actually change things or to help things grow or to develop ourselves or something like that. It's like, no, that's a different mentality, right? We still do that, but we do it from a place, like you said, with that guy in leadership, of where things are actually at. Right?
Yeah.
Of a place of presence, of letting go of the outcomes and then pursuing them still. And how you can still have hopes, even expectations are good to a certain degree, as long as they don't become like unhealthy, stifling you. Right.
Yeah.
But it's important to have like expectations for how things are going to come through and that kind of, and getting your hopes up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you still have to go after those things, but it's done from a place of open hands.
Right. Of open hands.
Right. No matter what the outcome is, I'm going to be all right.
Yeah. Revelation says that they overcome by the word of the testimony, the blood of the Lamb, the word of the testimony, and loving not their lives even unto death.
Even unto death, yeah.
And that's something that we reference all the time, but we often don't say that last part.
Right.
We always say they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony. But there were actually 3 ingredients by which they overcame.
Yeah.
Loving not your life even unto death.
Even unto death.
That's being willing to let things die.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we trust in Jesus, the blood of the Lamb. We have the word of our testimony where we know what we've experienced. We know what we come from. We don't act like it hasn't happened. And we also are willing to let go of our lives, even unto death, you know, where we, that's it.
Yeah. And Jesus doesn't tell us this because he's just trying to like make our lives harder or whatever. It actually lightens the load.
Yes.
Right? So
totally lightens the load.
It's actually freedom for us, you know, to let go of those things and to recognize those things, right? It starts with recognizing those things, recognizing, man, what am I holding on to? Who am I trying to control? What am I trying to control in my life? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Jesus, help me. You know, sometimes he has to come and he has to peel off every finger that you're trying to hold on because you're trying so hard to hold on to certain things in your life, certain outcomes in your life. But he knows that out of anxiety and out of fear, we'll end up pushing away those very dreams, you know, those very things we're holding on to. And he wants to give us the desires of our heart. Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of lights. Right. So he wants to give us those things, but he wants us to receive them with open hands, you know, and he wants us not to be tied in the world, but not of the world. Right. So having his life within us, but having everything open. And then when we have everything open, God gives us those things. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with Solomon, right? Like Solomon asked God for wisdom. And then God's like, because you didn't ask for all of these things of the world, but you asked for wisdom to lead my people well, I'm going to give you everything else as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like this open hands, like, I just want to learn how to do this thing right, God. Help. Right. You know? And it was like letting go of like all the pleasures he could have asked for from God. And instead he asks for wisdom on how to actually lead his people. And then God's like, because you asked for this, I'm going to give you, like, you're going to be the richest man who ever lived, you know? And he got all of those things back, you know what I mean? By letting go of those things and just trying to go after the kingdom, you know, just trying to go after what God wanted, you know?
Yeah, to take care of his people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good stuff, man.
Good stuff.
It's good stuff. The Bible's dope. Can I just say that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Are you guys okay with that? Are you guys comfortable with that? The Bible's so dope. But we hope that you thanks for being a part of this conversation with us. You know, we want to grow in this stuff, and we hope that you guys will step into that even this week, finding out those things that you want to let go of, that you need to let go of, and trust God to bring a resurrection about in your life. But yeah, make sure to follow us. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, to follow us on Spotify, on iTunes podcasts. Just follow us everywhere. You can follow us. You can find us on Instagram too at Your Brain on God. We're so excited to make more content for you guys, and we love doing this and inviting you guys into the conversation. So have an amazing couple weeks, and we will see you next time.